You ever wonder how courts deal with really tricky legal puzzles? When different laws seem to totally contradict each other, or when a law clashes with our fundamental rights. Well, judges don't just guess. They have this secret toolkit, a set of incredibly powerful principles that help them figure out what the Constitution really means. So today, let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside. So get this. A state passes a law to control loud amplifiers. Seems simple, right? It's about keeping the peace. But hang on. Amplifiers are used for communication and broadcasting, and that's supposed to be under the control of the central government. So whose law is it, really? A simple noise complaint suddenly blows up into a massive constitutional question. Or how about this one? Imagine a huge, really important law gets passed, but buried inside there's just one section, maybe even just a single sentence, that violates a fundamental right. Do you have to throw the whole thing out? Scrap all the good parts just because of one tiny flaw? Well, the answers to these puzzles are found in something called constitutional doctrines. Now, these aren't laws themselves. Think of them more like guiding principles or methods that courts use to understand what a law is really trying to do. They're what makes our Constitution a flexible, living document, not just some old rule book. Okay, let's go back to that first puzzle about the noisy amplifiers. This is a classic problem in a country like ours where the powers of the central government and the state governments can sometimes get tangled up. The big question is, who gets the final say? The first tool we're going to pull out of the kit is the Doctrine of Pith and Substance. Now, pith is just a fancy word for the essence or the core of something. This doctrine tells judges to look past all the side effects and minor details and ask a very simple question. What is this law truly about? What's its real heart and soul? And this isn't just a hypothetical. It brings us to a real case, State of Rajasthan versus G. Chawla. The battle lines were drawn. Was this law really about public health, which is the state's domain? Or was it stepping on the toes of broadcasting, which is a union power? This whole idea is summed up perfectly by what the court itself said. The goal is to dig deep, to look past what the law does on the surface, and find its true nature and character. That's how you know which government has the power to make it. So what happened in the end? The Supreme Court ruled that, yeah, an amplifier is for communication, but the essence of the law was about preventing a public nuisance and protecting people's health. The impact on broadcasting, that was just a side effect. The law's pith and substance was public health, so the state law stood. Problem solved. Of course, there's always a flip side, right? What if a legislature tries to be sneaky and disguise a law to creep into another's territory? That's where the doctrine of colourable legislation comes in. It's based on a simple idea. You can't do something indirectly if you're forbidden from doing it directly. You can't just put a clever disguise on a law to grab power you don't have. All right, now for our second puzzle. What happens when a law is mostly good, but it has one bad part? Well, this is where the courts put on their scrubs and act like surgeons. And the tool they use is called the Doctrine of Severability. The name gives it away, right? To sever means to cut. Instead of letting a whole law die because of one sick part, the court performs surgery, carefully removing just the unconstitutional piece. But this isn't just random hacking and slashing. The court follows a very clear three-step test. First, you gotta pinpoint the bad part. Second, ask yourself, can we actually cut this out cleanly without destroying the rest of the text? And third, this is the most important one, can the law still work and make sense after that part is gone? If you can say yes to all three, the surgery is a success. We saw this in action in the famous A.K. Gopalan case. A section of the Preventative Detention Act was found to be unconstitutional, but instead of killing the entire act, the Supreme Court just severed that one invalid section. The rest of the law, which was perfectly fine, was saved and stayed on the books. Okay, now for a totally different kind of problem. What happens to laws that were perfectly fine before the Constitution came along, but now they clash with our fundamental rights? Are they just gone forever? This is where we need to be careful with our tools. With severability, that bad part is cut out and it's gone for good. But with this next doctrine, the law isn't destroyed, it's just put to sleep. This is the Doctrine of Eclipse. And the idea is actually pretty cool. A law that existed before the Constitution and now conflicts with a fundamental right isn't dead. Instead, that fundamental right casts a shadow over it, like a solar eclipse. The law is still there, but it's dormant, unenforceable, just hidden in the dark. The Bikaji case tells this story perfectly. So in 1947, there was a law allowing the state to have a monopoly on motor transport. Perfectly valid. Then, 1950, the Constitution comes along with the right to practice any profession. That right casts a shadow, an eclipse, over the old law, making it unenforceable. But then, in 1951, the Constitution itself gets amended to allow state monopolies. The shadow is lifted, the eclipse ends, and poof, the old law wakes up and becomes valid all over again.
So what does this all tell us? These doctrines, from figuring out a law's true character, to performing legal surgery, to casting a shadow over an old rule, they're not just jargon for lawyers. They are the actual gears that keep the entire machine of our Constitution running smoothly.
At the end of the day, this toolkit is absolutely crucial. It resolves conflicts, it balances power between the center and the states, and it protects our rights by fixing flawed laws instead of just junking them. But most of all, these doctrines are what transform the Constitution from a static, dusty old rulebook into a living, breathing code that can actually adapt to the challenges we face today and tomorrow. And that leaves us with a final, really important question. This toolkit gives judges a massive amount of power to interpret, to save, or even to put to sleep laws that were made by the people we elect. So how do we make sure that power is always used to strengthen our democracy? How do we keep that balance so that it upholds the spirit of the Constitution without just overriding the will of the people? That's a puzzle that's worth thinking about.